Good evening, Little Masters, and welcome to episode 96 of the Prancing Pony Podcast, where tonight, well, we're still at Bag End, enjoying a few squibs, crackers, and backer wrappers.
Not to mention dwarf candles, elf fountains, and goblin barkers. Folks will join the party and dance the Springle Ring in just a moment, but first, I'm Sean Marchese, the real-life Lord of the Mark, and I'm here with the man of the West, the vulgar expression to my one gross, Alan Sisto.
Thank you, Sean. Like goods in a package, eh? Oh,
Yep.
and just so you know, I am not getting on a table and dancing with you, man. Just no way. So
That's
Springle
fair.
Ring,
That's fair.
Springle Ring is just out.
I'll be soloing it.
Yes, you will.
The Lord of the Dance and the Mark.
And the nap. Folks, today we join Bilbo and 144 of his closest friends for good food and fireworks. And then, well, we'll get packing for a very long walk.
If we show up, though, it won't be a gross anymore, will it?
Oh,
Or maybe the Sackville Bagginses could wait outside.
that would be good. But before we kick them out and take their places, it's time for a new segment. Sean, why don't you start us off with our first installment of Meanwhile Elsewhere in Middle-earth?
All right, I've been waiting for this one. Folks, as we get
Yeah,
deeper into
me
The
too.
Lord of the Rings, with its famous interlacing of the different plot lines, this new segment's going to give us a way to help keep the timeline straight and remember what's going on in other places at the same time when we're looking at a particular chapter.
Yeah.
So here, Bilbo's long-expected party takes place in the year 3001 of the Third Age. Now that's 60 years after his adventure in The Hobbit.
That's right.
So meanwhile, elsewhere in Middle-earth, and I will do that every single time we have this
and you
segment.
should, yes, absolutely. It's mandatory.
Yep. It was circa 3000, so right about now, give or take a year, that Appendix B tells us that Saruman dares to use the Palantir of Orthanc, but becomes ensnared by Sauron, who has the Ithil Stone. He becomes a traitor to the Council. His spies report that the Shire is being closely guarded by the Rangers.
So it's right now, or maybe even a little bit earlier, but certainly not later, like when Frodo sets out on his quest, that Saruman finally becomes a tool of Sauron. But of course, becoming ensnared by Sauron was not the start of Saruman's fall, was it?
No, it was really more of a tipping point. Now, those of you who heard our episodes on the last chapter of the Silmarillion, of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, will probably remember that Saruman had actually started down the road to evil a really long time before. It was as early as 2463 of the Third Age. So this is over 500 years ago.
Wow. Yeah.
Actually, right around the time that Sméagol found the ring. That's when Saruman's pride first started to get the best of him. If you recall, or if you have your copy of the Silmarillion handy, you'll see that that was when the White Council was convened to deal with the shadow that had returned to Mirkwood. And Galadriel actually wanted Gandalf to lead the council, but Silmarillion tells us, and Saruman begrudged them that, for his pride and desire of mastery was grown great. But Gandalf refused the office, and so that's how Saruman ended up running it anyway.
But still being upset with Gandalf the whole time,
Right.
not to mention
Yeah.
Galadriel.
Yes.
Well, a few centuries later, in 2851, so this would be 90 years before Bilbo's adventure, Gandalf tried to talk the White Council into attacking Dol Guldur, but Saruman overruled him and, quote, counseled them to wait yet and to watch. Now, at that time, they didn't know why he talked them out of it, but the Silmarillion tells us, and this is again from the last section of the Rings of Power in the Third Age, or Otrapata, that
As
Saruman...
we've come to know it affectionately on the Prancing Pony podcast.
Hey, if we can come up with an acronym for it, we will.
Yeah.
So that tells us...
It's a bit of a mouthful.
It is.
Actually,
It is
the
definitely.
acronym's a bit of a mouthful, too. But
It is.
We
Well,
digress.
so's Spabimi, but, we
That's
like
true.
that. So the text there tells us that Saruman had turned to dark thoughts and was already a traitor in heart, for he desired that he and no other should find the great ring, so that he might wield it himself and order all the world to his will.
Wow. Dark designs already.
Already.
And we know from that section that, Saruman started becoming obsessed with the ring and wanting to possess it just from studying it. It was a real example of, too much knowledge being a dangerous thing. Just knowing its secrets and spending so much time thinking about it made him want to possess it. And that's when he started down that path of evil, just by undermining the White Council in these little ways. Getting in touch with Sauron by the Palantir was really just the thing that finally broke him.
Getting in touch with Sauron. It sort of makes the Palantir sound like Middle-earth's equivalent of Facebook.
Well, they did both start out as Maiar of Aule, right? So it probably was a little bit like a couple of old coworkers getting back in touch on Facebook after a while. It's like, hey, it's Myron from the jewelry department. Remember me, man? It's Kurumo. I used to work in Metal and Wheels.
Wow, that is the world's worst work reunion. Oh,
Yeah.
that's just awful.
We would not want to be at that happy hour.
No, that's, well, and it's probably at a TGI Fridays, which makes it even worse. But seriously, bad jokes aside, the fact that Saruman and Sauron both used to be Maiar of Aule would have had a lot to do with Saruman's turn towards evil. Yeah. Remember how common it is for Aule's people to have a love for their craft that ends up turning into this kind of possessive love. Of course, we saw this most closely in, dun, 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 we need theme music for the piñata, with Fëanor. But it is exactly. But it is a running theme in the Legendarium that echoes with Ulmo's warning to Turgon in the Silmarillion: "Love not too well the work of thy hands and the devices of thy heart."
Very well said.
And I'm serious. We're going to have to find a sound effect for the Fëanor.
We really do need to find like a little whacking noise or something.
I'll dig one up. I'll find one.
There you go.
Next episode for sure.
And it won't be long before we get back to that theme of love not too well the work of thy hands and the devices of thy heart. It's going to pop up several times in Lord of the Rings, and we're going to get lots of chances to see the kind of trouble Saruman gets into in the coming years. So, stay tuned for that. But for now, let's get back to the party.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Before we do that, I just want to put a quick note here to say how much I'm really going to enjoy this new segment. This is going to be a lot of fun to put together, a lot of fun to talk about, and looking forward to it. So, with that said, let's go ahead and start. And this time, unlike usual, it's not at the very beginning because the chapter's already underway, so I don't get to say that. But it is the beginning of the party. So
there you go.
I'm going to go ahead and read just the not even the first paragraph, just the first like half of the paragraph, just kind of get us going. Bilbo Baggins called it a party, but it was really a variety of entertainments rolled into one. And you know what? All I can hear there is, "They call it a mine." So this is Bilbo. They call it a party.
They call it a party.
Anyway.
Party.
That's all I could hear was John Rhys Davies doing that line. But so, of course, though it was called a party, it was really this variety of entertainments rolled into one. Practically everybody living near was invited. A very few were overlooked by accident, but as they turned up all the same, that did not matter. Many people from other parts of the Shire were also asked, and there were even a few from outside the borders. Bilbo met the guests and additions at the new White Gate in person. He gave away presents to all and sundry. The latter were those who went out again by a back way and came in again by the gate. Oh, goodness.
So many great little witty moments like this in these early chapters,
I love it.
Aren't there?
That's the thing about this. Exactly. There's so much. You feel like you could read every word, but sadly, we aren't allowed to do that.
No, we would not be able to do that.
No, but
we wouldn't be doing it very long if we did.
No, you're right. We'd probably get a letter pretty quick. Yeah, I would imagine we would.
Yes, we would.
So we get the fact that he invited just about everybody nearby. And then we get kind of these three tiers, right? We get the local tier where it's nearly everyone.
Right.
Then we get many from other parts of the Shire, and then a few outsiders. So I just thought that was
okay. So it's largely sort of a local.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say block party. It's much bigger than that, but it's kind of a local gathering. And then mostly. Obviously there's always the people who are gonna who it's worth it for them to come in for this. Yeah.
Well, especially family members, which of the 144, they're almost all extended family.
Right.
Very extended in some cases, but
right.
It's also, it seems to me, to be a reminder of the outlandish folk. We talked about that in the last episode. That was one of the charges that, who was it? It was Sandyman who talked about,
probably,
all those outsiders. And sure enough, like in the next paragraph, we see that, hey,
dwarves and all that coming in and out of
Baggins. Oh, yeah, it was the miller. Yeah, look at the outlandish folk that visit him. And sure enough, outlandish folks showed up. And here we've got people who are from outside the borders or outlanders. So,
there you go. Just one of those signs that Bilbo is really, he's been changed so much by his life experience that he's just an outsider. I mean, an eccentric is really what he is, but he kind of sticks out like a sore thumb in the Shire now.
Yeah, he really does.
In case it's not obvious. Yeah.
I do love that even though some people were overlooked, first of all, they were just overlooked. They weren't intentionally shunned, but then they just show up anyway. That's just. Did you have anybody crash your wedding, for an example? Because we did.
Did you really? I had a pretty small wedding, so no, there were no crashers. But I can imagine.
We got married on our college campus, so we had a couple of folks show up who we had specifically not invited. I was like, "What are you doing here?" But you can't say that because that's
right.
Not
no,
nice.
Right. Like, hey, how did you hear about this? Come on in, I guess.
Yeah, no names.
That's funny.
No names.
Of course not. That's funny.
Yeah.
And then he gives gifts to everybody, right?
Yep.
All and sundry, which I love because
what a phrase.
I don't know that it's such a great phrase because all and sundry is this phrase we have in English, which is kind of a silly phrase when you think about it, because all, well, everybody knows what that means, and then sundry just sort of means miscellaneous others. Well, if you got all, then you've already got sundry in that. So why do we even bother saying all and sundry?
If this were a Venn diagram, the circle sundry would be fully contained within the circle all.
Exactly. So why do we even need to say all and sundry? But I love the fact that Tolkien kind of plays with that by saying, well, the sundry in this case are people who went through twice.
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
That is awesome.
But Bilbo actually, meets each one of them in person, doesn't he?
I thought that was pretty impressive, really, given how he really didn't want to deal with anybody just a day or so before. Even people who had party business didn't talk to Bilbo. He was too busy. But here he is. It's his party. Mm-hmm. He'll cry if he wants to.
He'll cry if he wants to. I was thinking exactly the same thing. So
he gives away the presents, and of course that's an interesting tradition, right? I mean, we're not going to read that little bit of the rest of the paragraph, but this idea that we're all familiar with now, the notion that hobbits give birthday presents on their birthdays to their guests rather than expecting presents.
Yeah,
and I love that. That's such an interesting concept. They're not big gifts. They're not giving cars with red bows on them or anything like that. But they are giving gifts, I think, showing appreciation for the friendship and things like that.
It's really cool. And I like this kind of,
it's neat.
This comment, from the narrator. It's not a bad system. It was not a bad system. I like that. It's a nice little understatement. It sounds very nice, actually.
Yeah, I think that is an understatement.
Much more than that, Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you just have to deal with, now what do I do with this gift? Well, I'll give it away.
Right.
There's a lot of that, a lot of recycled gifts, a lot of mathams.
Well, and I think it is later in this chapter that it said that, because of that, that's why there's all these mathams in people's houses. And so there are some things that just sort of get passed around.
Kind of becomes like the white elephant gifts,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
You've got a small little line here I want you to read before we go on. This chapter's so condensed that there's so many different pieces to the narrative that we want to take little pieces at a time. So I'm going to have you read that one short paragraph.
Yep, sure thing. And this is going to show us how these presents are a little special.
Yes, they are.
On this occasion, the presents were unusually good. The Hobbit children were so excited that for a while they almost forgot about eating. There were toys the like of which they had never seen before, all beautiful and some obviously magical. Many of them had indeed been ordered a year before, and had come all the way from the mountain and from Dale, and were of real dwarf make.
Well, my first thought is he ordered them a year ago? Do they still not have Amazon Prime in Middle-earth? I mean, seriously, 2 days or a year? What would you rather have?
These are custom made, though. I mean,
I know. I'm just...
and there's a lot of them.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a good point. We are so used to instant gratification. You can get some mass-produced mathams from Amazon or your online retailer of choice. And they'll show up in a day.
2 days. 2 days. Or even, that's clearly not the case here. You're ordering something from Dale, you're going to be paying top dollar.
Yeah.
They are amazing gifts, so much
They still haven't automated. Their factories are, still doing things the old-fashioned way. And they're proud of it.
They are. It is old school.
Yep.
It says made in Dale right there on the toy.
That's how you know it's quality right there.
That's right.
See that stamp? Made in Dale.
There you go.
If you can read the runes.
If you can read the runes. I love that they almost forgot about eating. That tells you right there that's they really are pretty
that's
amazing.
Special, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's important. Those are nice presents right there. But it also made me think, and I'm sure it made everybody else think, of that quote from chapter 1 of The Hobbit, and I've pulled it up here conveniently enough. Altogether, those were good days for us. By the way, this is Thorin explaining to Bilbo what it was like in Erebor.
Mm-hmm.
And the poorest of us had money to spend and to lend, and leisure to make beautiful things just for the fun of it, not to speak of the most marvelous and magical toys, the like of which is not to be found in the world nowadays. So my grandfather's halls became full of armor and jewels and carvings and cups, and the toy market of Dale was the wonder of the North.
Mm.
Yeah,
that's a great quote, and yes, I did think of that immediately.
Oh yeah,
and I'm glad you brought it up because we talked about The Hobbit in a lot of cases in The Hobbit. We talked about how it had more of a childish tone, not childish in a negative way, but just like more of a childlike tone,
child friendly,
child friendly, yeah. And we talk about how Lord of the Rings has this more adult tone, this gravity that The Hobbit doesn't have. But this is a good reminder that the Lord of the Rings does start out much more in that kind of childlike space that the Hobbit has.
It does for one chapter, really. I mean, once you get to Shadow of the Past, that seems to be all gone. But yeah,
that is a good point. Although there are a few things here and there, I would say even
That's
all
true.
Throughout book one, there are a few things here and there. Three's Company.
Three's Company, Shortcut to Mushrooms. Yeah, I think as long as they're still in the Shire, there are those moments. Aren't there?
He kind of goes back and forth. I think. Yeah, chapter 2 is brutal actually, but then
it's quite dark.
Shortcut to Mushrooms.
We put Gollum on the rack and we tortured him. And,
exactly. Yeah,
it's like we waterboarded the Smeagol guy. And...
I'm not reading that to my kid. No, but yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're right. I think this chapter is pretty consistently that Hobbit tone.
Yeah.
And then he'll kind of go back and forth a little bit. It's an interesting thing to me because you can really see the Lord of the Rings developing in his mind just by the tone.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The tone
and
of
we'll
it.
definitely be pointing it out as we go through.
I think you're right. And I think where it finally makes that permanent transition to that more adult Lord of the Rings tone, we'll see is in chapter 8, Fog on the Barrow Downs. I think, Tom still is kind of maybe that last remnant of that sort of child-friendly.
Yeah.
But then you get the disembodied hand.
Right. Oh, it's so creepy. It's so creepy. I love it so much. But
I do too. But I think that kind of marks the point. I don't think after that you get a lot of that sort of thing. Maybe a few moments.
You're right.
But that seems to be kind of the final shift, if you will. But,
I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think it'll be fun to pick up on those when we get to them,
I agree. We'll need to keep that in mind, sort of keep that, going in the back of our head and kind of see where those moments happen, where he goes back and forth.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, don't worry. We've got a list of running themes going.
Oh, boy, you're not kidding. I've got like a page of themes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seriously. Yeah, this is going to be big. I think we had probably maybe 5 or 6 themes we kept coming back to with the Silmarillion, maybe the same for Hobbit. I think we've got a dozen at least.
At least a dozen for this, yeah. And some of them are the same ones as the Silmarillion and the Hobbit.
Absolutely they are. Yeah, no doubt about it. So after the toys, we're not going to read this next little bit, but we get this the piece about the meals. I love that.
3 meals at this party. That's a long party.
At a party. That is a long party, man.
3 official meals, not counting all the food in between.
Well, right, because it's not as though they're ever walking around without food available.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's snacks and hors d'oeuvres. Well, I don't know. They probably don't call them hors d'oeuvres. That's a Frenchified word. So.
No, I'm sure they don't. They probably call exactly.
But yeah, I mean, it's just a great idea. But there was one little thing that caught my eye. Apparently, Elevenses really is a real thing. I didn't know this, not being British myself.
Yeah.
But it is a British colloquialism or slang for a snack around 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
Which, I'm sorry, you're going to have lunch in an hour. What do you need a snack for?
Well, maybe they have lunch a little later. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Don't they have tea at like 2?
Or maybe non-hobbits don't have both. I don't know. Maybe some of our UK listeners might have to keep us honest.
Maybe they have 11s and then they skip lunch and go straight to tea. I don't know.
It's kind of like brunch, Maybe you don't
have breakfast and brunch and lunch.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you're a hobbit, I guess.
Well, yeah. I am a hobbit in all but size. As Tolkien would say.
Yeah.
Oh goodness.
You eat 3 meals between 9 and 12. You will be a hobbit, and you'll be much more than a hobbit in size pretty soon.
You'll be horizontally a hobbit.
Right. 3'6" horizontally.
That's right. Oh boy. Yeah. No, not going there.
What do you make of the distinction between dinner or supper?
Oh, the dinner supper thing. That's such an interesting deal because that's even an issue regionally here in the States, isn't it? I mean, you go to the South and supper's what I think of dinner, that is the evening meal that you'd eat around 6 o'clock, is often called supper in some parts of the country. To me,
that is true.
I've never used supper. It's not a meal I've ever really.
I never, and I grew up in the South, but I grew up in a city, and or in a suburb, and so it was always dinner. But I mean, I did have family who kind of grew up in more rural parts of Louisiana, and I guess they did say supper. Yeah, and I guess it is sort of 2 different words for the same thing. But I think it's interesting that there's a couple places where Tolkien uses this dinner or supper. I think he uses it again or he used it previously, I guess, in the Hobbit somewhere. I want to say it was chapter 7, when they're with Beorn and they're just talking about they had a supper or a dinner. I don't know.
Oh, interesting.
I don't know if there's anything to make of it. I mean,
the only thing I'm aware of that I'm almost certain is true is that supper tends to be more informal. In fact, when I was doing a little research, and I didn't put this in my notes, so you'll have to forgive me that I don't recall the source. But what I do remember is that apparently, supper was the casual thing where you don't get dressed up. Dinner is the more formal setting where everybody dresses appropriately and, it's the fancier meal. I don't even remember where I read that.
That actually does make sense with the way he distinguishes it later on. Mm-hmm. So we'll just come back to this in a minute, but yeah.
Yeah.
Bilbo
'Cause we
says
will
something about
see
everybody
supper in here more.
outside the family having supper, but then the folks who are the 144, the
Have
gross,
the dinner party.
they
Yeah.
actually have the dinner party. So yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that might be it.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Tolkien always plays with language in these interesting ways.
He does, and he certainly it's no accident. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
I'm going to read a little bit here about the fireworks themselves. Now, we've got a list first. We see Gandalf not only brought them, but designed them and made them. So he's Gandalf, firework design, manufacturing, and delivery. I love that. he's kind of a pyromaniac. Yeah. I mean, sort of a no serenade, no fire brigade, just pyromania. Come on.
What do you want? Oh, man.
Yeah.
Man.
We'll stop doing that.
Is that our second Rock of Ages reference in 2 episodes or 3 episodes?
It is, in a very short span after having gone all this way with no Def Leppard at all. That's really a shame.
I know.
But yeah.
Well, it's going to be wall-to-wall Def Leppard references in season
Now, Gandalf's
2.
got like the ZZ Top beard, but I can see him rocking a Def Leppard sort of thing.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Pyromania, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's got the Ring of Fire. He'd be perfect.
Exactly.
The Ring of Fire.
He's not the man in black, though.
He's the man in gray. That's right. Well, what is gray other than just faded black? Anyway.
Whoa, man, that's deep.
That is deep.
Gandalf is like Johnny Cash after 3,000 years.
After a lot of washes.
In Arda.
You needed to use cold. I've been telling you all along, you've got to use cold to do your laundry. Anyway. All right. With that digression aside, I'm going to go ahead and read what I think is one of the most beautiful descriptions of fireworks I've ever read, actually.
This is lovely.
There were rockets like a flight of scintillating birds singing with sweet voices. There were green trees with trunks of dark smoke, their leaves opened like a whole spring unfolding in a moment, and their shining branches dropped glowing flowers down upon the astonished hobbits, disappearing with a sweet scent just before they touched their upturned faces. There were fountains of butterflies that flew glittering into the trees. There were pillars of colored fires that rose and turned into eagles, or sailing ships, or a phalanx of flying swans. There was a red thunderstorm and a shower of yellow rain. There was a forest of silver spears that sprang suddenly into the air with a yell like an embattled army and came down again into the water with a hiss like 100 hot snakes. And there was also one last surprise in honor of Bilbo, and it startled the hobbits exceedingly, as Gandalf intended. The lights went out. A great smoke went up. It shaped itself like a mountain seen in the distance and began to glow at the summit. It spouted green and scarlet flames. Out flew a red golden dragon, not life-size, but terribly lifelike. Fire came from his jaws. His eyes glared down. There was a roar, and he whizzed 3 times over the heads of the crowd. They all ducked, and many fell flat on their faces. The dragon passed like an express train, turned a somersault, and burst over Bywater with a deafening explosion. Oh man, that is just awesome.
That's gorgeous. I love it. That's so great.
All of that. Oh,
you can, and there's every once in a while Tolkien comes out with one of these really long passages with tons of sensory information in it.
Yes.
Here you first of all you see it all so vividly.
Yeah.
And then you've got the sounds, the scintillating birds singing with sweet voices. You've got the scent of these dropping flowers.
Whoever thinks of smell with fireworks other than gunpowder?
Right, exactly. Yeah, the one obvious smell. Yeah,
yeah, but a sweet scent. I love that. That's just magical.
These are just spectacular fireworks, and I love the way he's referencing Bilbo's adventure.
Yeah,
with these fireworks. Obviously the dragon,
the butterflies in the
like
trees.
The eagles, the trees, the eagles, the butterflies, the spears, the army.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, it's so cool.
Just beautiful stuff. But once with Gandalf and fireworks, I mean, I was researching this a little bit. I found the only appearance of fireworks in the letters in letter 301. Tolkien mentions to Donald Swann. I should probably have set that up. Donald Swann is the one who collaborated with Tolkien to put Tolkien's poems to music in The Road Goes Ever On.
Right. Yeah.
I have the book. I don't have the actual album. I think the copy of the book I have would have come with a vinyl, some years ago. But
the book is basically I actually don't have this one, but I've seen it. It's sheet music with an introduction by Tolkien, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And some versions of that book do have. I think there was one that had like a flexi disc that you could play on a turntable, and I think some of the more recent editions actually did have a CD in them.
Yeah, there was one with a CD.
It's
I haven't been
very
able to
hard
find
to find. I don't actually have it yet.
Yeah, I only have the physical book itself with not the music. So anyway,
I have heard the music
yes,
because a friend of mine has
it,
and so I've heard the CD, but I don't actually have it.
Yeah. So all that to say that in a letter to Donald
Sorry, we
Swan,
digressed
that's
quite a bit there.
We do that. In a letter to Donald Swan, Tolkien says, "Fireworks have no special relation to me. They appear in the books and would have done even if I disliked them, because they are part of the representation of Gandalf, bearer of the Ring of Fire, the Kindler, the most childlike aspect shown to the hobbits being fireworks." Now, I love that, but there's a little something going on there, isn't there? Bearer of the Ring of Fire, but wait a minute. Well, Hammond and Scull point this out. This is another one of those times when having that reader's companion is helpful. This is an argument after the fact, as they say. As you all remember, Gandalf was already connected with fireworks in Bilbo's mind way back in Chapter 1 of The Hobbit.
Right.
Long before Tolkien had ever come up with the idea of the Elven Rings.
So the Ring of Fire was really more a way of explaining the fireworks than vice versa.
Exactly. I have a feeling it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
That is really good stuff, yeah.
Now, but there was one other thing in there that was an anachronism. You know, we talked about a lot of these in The Hobbit.
Yes, I know the one you're thinking of, the express train.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think we see too many of those in Lord of the Rings comparatively.
No, there are much
The Hobbit
fewer.
has a lot.
The Hobbit had the the whistle of an engine coming out of a tunnel.
Yep.
And here we've got dragging past like an express train.
Yeah. And that's one of those things,
Yeah. Again, we're still in that sort of simpler, less epic, I think, mode in this first chapter. And,
this is more micro scale. Yeah.
Yeah, and he gets away with an anachronism like that. You can't really see him getting away with an anachronism like that in like the Battle of the Pelennor Fields.
Exactly. And the Dwimmer Lake landed on the field of battle like a forklift.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, what?
And Gron smashed like a Mack truck into the gates of Minas Tirith. Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, goodness. That would not work. And it would be much more shocking to read it there than it is to read it here.
Exactly.
I think especially after having just read The Hobbit, where we had those anachronisms and they seem to not be as problematic.
If you go right from The Hobbit into this book, which is what I did when I read it the first time, it's a much smoother transition.
I agree.
You know, if he had completely gone to that high epic style from the very beginning, it would have been pretty jarring.
Yeah, there was Eru, the One, whom in Arda the elves call Iluvatar, and he was rather like a freight train. I mean, come on, that's just, that wouldn't work.
He shone like a halogen lamp in the darkness. I'm trying to imagine Martin Shaw reading that.
And not mispronouncing it. Yeah, that would be good.
Oh.
No, I tease.
There's love
only
Martin
a handful.
Shaw.
We do. His
we
reading
love
is
Martin Shaw aside from
spectacular.
a couple of pronunciations.
I would happily pay a limb or two, if one of them was yours, to be able to sound like him.
There was Eru, the One.
Yeah, he has such a voice. As an audiobook narrator, I would seriously love to have that sound. But anyway.
Well, you're not giving him my limbs, or you're not giving anybody my limbs.
No, can I? You're not using your left arm very much, are you? It says here I can take your liver.
Well done.
Oh, man. I actually have you reading the next paragraph. Could you take that one for us?
All right. That is the signal for supper, said Bilbo. The pain and alarm vanished at once, and the prostrate hobbits leaped to their feet. There was a splendid supper for everyone, that is, except those invited to the special family dinner party. This was held in the great pavilion with the tree. The invitations were limited to 12 dozen, a number also called by the hobbits one gross, though the word was not considered proper to use of people, and the guests were selected from all the families to which Bilbo and Frodo were related, with the addition of a few special unrelated friends, such as Gandalf. Many young hobbits were included, and present by parental permission, for hobbits were very easygoing with their children in the matter of sitting up late, especially when there was a chance of getting them a free meal. Bringing up young hobbits took a lot of provender.
I love that.
I love that, just the use of that word provender.
It is. It's great.
This is a word that, I believe originally meant animal fodder, and I think still has this connotation of, quantity over quality, just like sustenance as opposed to, cuisine, a fine meal.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's great. It's so vivid.
It really is. We get that supper dinner distinction you talked about. And yeah, you're right. I mean, this definitely fits along with that definition that I talked about, not so much definition, but distinction, where supper is the more casual event,
right,
and dinner is the more formal event.
Yeah.
Supper is everybody but the 144. They get dinner.
Right. A dinner party. Yeah.
A dinner party.
A very high class event, except for the fact that they're hobbits.
Well, right. I don't know that high class is really something that they do in the Shire.
No, not with the feet on the table and everything.
No. We'll
I'm getting ahead of myself here.
That's good stuff, though. Let's see. Is there anything else in there that's worth chatting? I mean, well, there's a lot worth chatting about, but given that we want to try to keep our show to about 100 minutes, and we want to get through this in 5 years, I do think it's interesting that they let their kids stay up late. I can't imagine being a young person reading that and not taking that to my mom and saying, "Look, they let them stay up late.
Hobbits get to do it." Yeah, hobbits get to do it. Well, they're getting a free meal out of it. Yeah,
there you go. That's true.
That's what I've been told.
There goes my argument. It's all done.
All right. Well, let's talk about this gross of hobbits, shall we?
I think we shall. Not the gross hobbits, but the gross of hobbits. Very, very important distinction to make.
Very, very important distinction.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, like you said last time, these were many of them extremely wealthy families. This was what did you say? Like the Rockefellers and the Vanderbilts and the Forbes
and the Forbeses of the Shire.
I love that. It's true. These are the wealthy power families in the Shire, no doubt.
Mm-hmm.
But let's talk about some of their names now. This is all going to come to us courtesy of Tolkien's nomenclature, which is at the end of Hammond and Scull's Reader's Guide. So we're going to do a little word nerdery on some of the names. Why don't you tell us a little bit about grub?
Yeah, so grub is basically meant to recall the English verb grub, dig or root in the ground.
Makes sense.
Bilbo's grandmother was a Laura Grubb.
And wasn't one of the attorneys a Grubb? Wasn't it Grubb and something?
Grubb and Burrows. Yeah, that's right. I think we talked a little bit about money grubbing.
Yeah.
Didn't we?
Which certainly
fits chapter of The Hobbit.
With the ambulance chaser attorney there.
Yeah.
That's not to disrespect attorneys, as most of you know. I was one once. So.
Yeah. No, just a specific kind of attorney, or that would attempt to capitalize on the disappearance of a local personage with an auction.
Right. It's playing on a common stereotype, which is always good for a comedic laugh. Chub. Well, I probably you don't need me to tell you this, but I'll give you Tolkien's words because they are pretty awesome. Chub, said Tolkien, was chosen because its immediate association in English is with the adjective chubby, round and fat in bodily shape.
There you go. So, pretty straightforward. Yeah.
They're related by way of Bilbo's grandfather on his mother's side. That's the old Took, Gerontius Took.
Right.
He married Adamanta Chub, and they had 12 kids, which we talked about last time, including of course, 3 remarkable daughters whose names we discussed as well.
That's right.
And real quickly, brace girdle, that's, according to Tolkien, quote, used in the text, of course, with reference to the Hobbit tendency to be fat and so to strain their belts.
That's a good one. I like that.
I love that one. Yeah. Oh, man, those are my brace girdle pants right there. Those are right.
Yeah. Well, Brockhouse is one I like. That one comes from the old country word for badger, which was Brock.
Which of course.
And I need to give a little shout out to one of our listeners out there, old Badger Brock, who's named for a line from Adventures of Tom Bombadil.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking of.
That's a Hobbit name because, as the nomenclature points out, the Brock, the badger, builds complicated and well-ordered underground dwellings.
Mm-hmm.
Something very Hobbit-like about that.
Yes, there is.
Then there's Proudfoot. I know we're going to be talking about this one a little bit later, but for now, I'll just say that in a dictionary of English surnames, that is the title of the book, A Dictionary of English Surnames, we're told that this means one who walks with a haughty step. The Tolkien suggestion is actually that it's based on a physical characteristic that we're going to see shortly.
Yes, quite. Well, we spent more time on this in a recent Patreon special, so we're not going to give away all of our secrets on this, but we want to point out this quote from Appendix F from Lord of the Rings. Hobbit names in the Shire and in Bree were for those days peculiar, notably in the habit that had grown up some centuries before this time of having inherited names for families.
Mm-hmm.
As Hammond and Scull add, other peoples in Middle-earth, in contrast, used the patronymic system. For example, Aragorn, son of Arathorn.
Right.
And we talked about that at length in that episode on the anachronisms and not so much anachronisms, but the difference in time between the Shire and the rest of Middle-earth.
The Hobbits and the Shire and the rest of Middle-earth, which is much more
the
medieval,
whole Warwickshire, Victorian, thing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Circa 1900. Yeah, basically the Shire. Yeah, the Shire's circa 1900.
Right, and everything else is a little bit older and then a little bit older as they go further along.
Yeah.
Okay, so then we get a little bit about the food itself, and I'm going to read this next paragraph.
Okay.
All the 144 guests expected a pleasant feast, though they rather dreaded the after-dinner speech of their host, an inevitable item. He was liable to drag in bits of what he called poetry, and sometimes, after a glass or two, would allude to the absurd adventures of his mysterious journey. The guests were not disappointed. They had a very pleasant feast. In fact, an engrossing entertainment. I just wanted to emphasize that in case you missed that. An engrossing entertainment.
Ooh, that's a good catch.
Rich, abundant, varied, and prolonged. The purchase of provisions fell almost to nothing throughout the district in the ensuing weeks, but as Bilbo's catering had depleted the stocks of most of the stores, cellars, and warehouses for miles around, that did not matter much. I love that. Well,
That's great.
He bought locally, like we talked about.
He did buy locally, yeah.
I did want to point out something here. They absolutely did not want to hear any of the poetry. I just wanted to point this out for those of you who feel badly that you did what I used to do. The hobbits even skipped the poetry, man. The hobbits.
Well, come on. The hobbits are like, a bunch of bumpkins.
They are prosaic. That's true.
They don't. Yeah. What he called poetry. I love that. That's great.
It makes you wonder what they would call poetry.
I know.
Very simple rhyming stuff, I would imagine.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, there's probably a handful of things that Bilbo wrote. That
maybe
okay
like
with.
the bath song that we'll hear in a couple chapters, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Or even the Man in the Moon song, yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense.
But, that's, now that, all joking aside, I mean, this is another sign that he's just a different person than they are. They just don't get him anymore.
Right. That is true.
He's been so changed by his journey that he's too poetic. They're prosaic and he's poetic.
That's true. I obviously don't have to point out what I obviously pointed out, which is the fact that it was an engrossing entertainment. I don't think that was an accident, folks. But it is something I don't think I caught until this read through.
I didn't catch it until you just now did. You just now said
it.
That's
it's one of those things. But then, though, now that they have had this very pleasant feast and are probably still, well, we know what they're doing. They're filling up the corners, as the next paragraph tells us.
Filling up the corners. I think of that all the time.
That's a great stage. Every time I'm at Thanksgiving dinner or something like that, that phrase comes to mind.
Yeah. I think of that every time I go to a buffet, which I don't do much anymore because
you can't.
I just can't. The temptation is too great. But yeah, when I do go to a buffet, I always think of filling up the corners because there's always that last two plates that are just like, just get a couple things here that are just my corners that need to be filled up.
Sean, I'm going to go ahead and have you read the first little bit of Bilbo's speech.
All right. My dear people, began Bilbo, rising in his place. Hear, 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 they shouted, and kept on repeating it in chorus, seeming reluctant to follow their own advice. Bilbo left his place and went and stood on a chair under the illuminated tree. The light of the lanterns fell on his beaming face. The golden buttons shone on his embroidered silk waistcoat. They could all see him standing, waving one hand in the air. The other was in his trouser pocket. My dear Bagginses and Boffins, he began again, and my dear Tooks and Brandybucks, and Grubbs, and Chubbs, and Burrowses, and Hornblowers, and Bolgers, Bracegirdles, Good Bodies, Brockhouses, and Proudfoots. Proud feet, shouted an elderly hobbit from the back of the pavilion. His name, of course, was Proudfoot, and well merited. His feet were large, exceptionally furry, and both were on the table. Proudfoots, repeated Bilbo.
Yeah.
Also my good Sackville Bagginses that I welcome back at last to Bag End. Today is my 111th birthday. I am 11-1 today. Hooray, hooray, many happy returns, they shouted, and they hammered joyously on the tables. Bilbo was doing splendidly. This was the sort of stuff they liked, short and obvious.
Oh, that's hobbits for you. They love that.
That is hobbits for you.
I love that section. That really, the proud feet thing is phenomenal.
Such a memorable moment. Who doesn't remember the first time they read this, and who doesn't think this is one of their favorite, just their favorite moments.
And even from the film, that's one of those moments that you remember.
Oh, yeah.
It's good stuff. And of course, it's another linguistic joke, foot being one of those words that doesn't merely add an S when a plural. We've talked about, we talked about it before with dwarves and what would the plural of dwarves be, if we actually hadn't let that, if we'd kept that as an individualized plural.
Yeah.
Dwarros, I believe it was. So anyway, here, foot doesn't just add an S. And as Hammond and Scull point out, the Old English word for foot looks like it's foot, F-O-T, but with the long marker.
I think that's right.
So foot, plural feet. So that irregular plural goes back to Old English times.
Yeah, it does. And I think this is the perfect time to answer a question from listener Nathaniel G, who asked,
outside of the bag.
What is the proper plural?
That's a good point.
Outside of the bag, because, we're talking about it now. Mm-hmm. He asked, what is the proper plural of Proudfoot?
Good question.
Is the old Proudfoot joking? And if not, what's going on in this passage? Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say I think Proudfoots is correct. I think Bilbo's right here. I don't think it's Proudfeet. Even though foot is pluralized as feet, don't we usually pluralize family names, regularly with an S or an ES?
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, if, totally hypothetical situation here. If I had John Goodman coming over to my house with his whole family, legendary actor John Goodman, but would I tell my wife that the Goodmen are coming over, or would I say the Goodmans?
Of course. Yeah, you're right. It'd be the Goodman family. Well, yeah, you're right. I don't even know. I'd avoid the plural Goodmans. And just say the Goodman family.
You just avoid the plural just because you don't want to be wrong.
But you're right. It'd be the Goodmans. You're right.
It would totally be the Goodmans.
Yeah, of course it would.
And I would also say that in the prologue, we read from the prologue a couple of episodes ago, Tolkien pluralizes Harfoot as Harfoots, not Harfeet.
You're right. That's a very good point.
So I think what's going on here is here's a rustic hobbit who's very proud of his feet and his family, and he's just putting on these sophisticated airs. Well, it's proud feet, but Bilbo's traveled. He knows a bit more about language. Yeah. He's the poet. He's the philologist. I'll put my money on Bilbo.
I agree. And I think Hammond and Scull might agree with that. In their annotation for this, they say Bilbo is corrected, but they put the quotation marks around that. So I think the implication is that,
probably
that may be what Proudfoot thinks he's doing, but it's not really being corrected.
It's a bit like that proofreader who corrected Tolkien's spelling of nasturtiums.
That poor guy's like crying in a corner, just like, I won't do it again, Professor. I promise I won't.
Yeah, exactly.
If I was going to have the Goose family over, I would say we're going to have the Gooses over. I'm not going to say we're going to have the geese over.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to think of who the Goose family might be, other than maybe the co-pilot in Top Gun. But, that was just a call sign and not a name, so...
I did not see that reference coming, strangely enough. I don't know why.
Oh, man. Come on, Goose.
But if Iceman and his family were coming over, the Icemans.
Yeah, you're right. It'd be the Icemans. You're right. You're absolutely right. I wouldn't have that guy over. He was a jerk.
Yeah, he was. Yeah. Who's coming over tonight, honey? The Icemans.
Yeah. No.
No, don't bring him.
Gooses.
Let me know when the Mavericks are coming over. Or the Gooses.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. No. Yeah, we're in the danger zone now.
Oh, no. Well done, sir. Well done.
Thank you very much. I'll be here all night. Don't forget.
Oh, I'm going to have that song on my head for the rest of the night.
Well, in the next paragraph,
Kenny Loggins, wasn't it? Is that our first Kenny Loggins reference on the Prancing Pony podcast?
It will undoubtedly be our last.
After 96 episodes, we finally got a Loggins reference.
Seriously. It did take a while, didn't it? Yeah, there's probably a reason for that. But
man. All right, let's get back to it.
Yeah, back on track. In the next paragraph that we are not going to read, we hear about the musical crackers that have been pulled. I just want to make sure we clarify that they're different than the fireworks we talked about earlier being called crackers.
Mm-hmm.
These, and many of our audience will know this, they're not very common here in the U.S., but in England, they're, I guess, a regular thing.
Very common at Christmas time, yeah.
Yeah, at Christmas time, it's a tradition. It's a small paper roll that you pull open, and it actually has... not gunpowder, but it's got something that makes a little sound, like a cap gun sort of thing.
Yeah, it makes a little pop
when it pulls open.
Like one of those little caps that you throw or a cap gun. Yeah, and there's a small gift inside.
Exactly, a small little party favor. So that's what they're talking about.
And sometimes they're even musical instruments. Sometimes it's things like bells and whistles,
right, or a kazoo,
and horns and things like that. Yeah, exactly.
I want the kazoo, really.
Yeah.
Now I need a kazoo sound effect, but I don't have one. We'll see what we can find.
That's a good thing. That is
a very good thing. And then, you referenced in our opening the Springle ring, which again, we won't be reading that part, but the Springle ring is actually something that Tolkien invented. He told translators in the nomenclature how to translate that. He said, just use a word that implies, quote, a vigorous ring dance in which dancers often leaped up. So that's what a Springle ring is.
Oh, there you go.
Which explains why
and that's what he's doing with Springle. Yeah, it's a pretty dance, but rather vigorous.
Yeah, pretty but vigorous. That's exactly right. So not going to be my sort of thing. And, of course, we got that wonderful, wonderful, absolutely brilliant moment about half of you, half as well as I should like, less than half of you, half as well as you deserve. We talked about that at length. What episode was that? I can't remember off the top of my head.
That was episode 89, I believe. It was our last Questions After Nightfall.
Oh, okay.
Which,
you're right. If it was.
If folks don't listen, folks are not listening to those, just kind of skipping ahead for the
chapter
discussion episodes, you should definitely listen to those. We get some really good questions.
Great
questions. And we did get a question from one of our guests that we had in the virtual studio about whether this was an insult or not.
Right.
And you spent a lot of time breaking it down.
It was fun.
I think you kind of landed on it's really not an insult.
No, it's not.
He's actually being pretty nice. There was somebody who was on
the call, wasn't it?
That episode. Mm-hmm. Yeah, who was on the call who even said, well, I think he's actually being kind of nasty here, which I think I've been thinking about, and I don't know, I'm kind of starting to think that. I think that while the comment itself is not an insult, I think he's definitely messing with people.
Oh yeah, there is no doubt about that. He's trying to befuddle them. Even though the content of his words,
the comment itself is not an insult, but he's kind of messing with them because he knows they're not going to get it, and that's kind of the brilliant thing is he's insulting them and not insulting them at the same time.
Exactly. It's a condescension.
It's a very Bilbo thing to do.
It's an absolute condescension because he knows they're not going to figure it out, and so he's kind of demonstrating his intellectual superiority while at the same time phrasing it in a way that's not an insult.
Yeah.
Because if you look at through logically, half of the people he doesn't know as well as he would like. He'd like to know at least half of them. He'd like to know twice as well.
He'd like to know them twice as well. Right.
Whereas a smaller percentage, somewhere under 50%, he knows that they deserve to be liked more, but he doesn't like them any more than he does. So he's kind of insulting those people, but he's telling them I should like you more than I do. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, he's saying you deserve better than
what I'm giving
the
you.
opinion of you that I have.
Right. Yeah. Except for possibly the Sackville Bagginses, because of course they deserve every terrible thing.
Who deserve exactly who deserve exactly all the bad things that he thinks about them. That reminds me of after that episode released, one of our listeners, Daniel C. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he made this great graphic that just shows, he's got these, diagramming, 51% or more of the guests.
Right.
He'd like to know them at least twice as much.
And it looks like a little greater than less than arrow, little lines, little logical, Boolean terms. It's done.
It's brilliant. It's brilliant. He really had fun with the logic here. I'll go ahead and put that up in our show notes again and put it up on our social media.
We get great listener contributions, don't we? I mean, that goes right up there on the wall with Tom H's spectacular Balrog Wing essay.
Yeah.
It really does.
Yeah. We've gotten some really great stuff over the years.
Fun things.
Keep it coming,
Oh,
folks.
yeah, absolutely. We love that stuff.
Parliament's Bag isn't just for questions.
No.
Anything fun you've got.
We're here. We're listening. We're reading, and we'll put it on if it's worth it, no doubt.
And we'll share it.
Absolutely. Yep. I'm going to go ahead and read the rest of the speech. We obviously had to break it down, and, we didn't want to read the whole thing. Well, we did. I think we've covered that, right?
We do.
That our desire is not matched by our legal ability. Yeah. So
yes, exactly.
I'll pick up from
maybe Daniel can do a diagram for that for us. Our desire to read this entire book twice.
I don't
as much.
read half of it half as well as I should, half as often as I should like.
And I read less than half of it half as well as it deserves.
There you
go.
Okay. All right. So Bilbo goes ahead and he's giving the reasons why they're there. Secondly, to celebrate my birthday. I should say our birthday, for it is, of course, also the birthday of my heir and nephew, Frodo. He comes of age and into his inheritance today. Some perfunctory clapping by the elders, and some loud shouts of Frodo, Frodo, jolly old Frodo from the juniors. The Sackville Bagginses scowled and wondered what was meant by coming into his inheritance. Together we score 144. Your numbers were chosen to fit this remarkable total. One gross, if I may use the expression. No cheers. This was ridiculous. Many of the guests, and especially the Sackville Bagginses, were insulted, feeling sure they had only been asked to fill up the required number, like goods in a package. One gross indeed. Vulgar expression. It is also, if I may be allowed to refer to ancient history, the anniversary of my arrival by barrel at Esgaroth on the Long Lake, though the fact that it was my birthday slipped my memory on that occasion. I was only 51 then, and birthdays did not seem so important. The banquet was very splendid, however, though I had a bad cold at the time, I remember, and could only say, "Thank you very much." I now repeat it more correctly. Thank you very much for coming to my little party. Obstinate silence. They all feared that a song or some poetry was now imminent, and they were getting bored. Why couldn't he stop talking and let them drink his health? But Bilbo did not sing or recite. He paused for a moment. Thirdly and finally, he said, I wish to make an announcement. He spoke this last word so loudly and suddenly that everyone sat up who still could. I regret to announce that, though as I said, 11 years is far too short a time to spend among you, this is the end. I'm going. I am leaving now. Goodbye. And sure enough, done.
Man, there he goes. Man, what an effect. What an effect this has to have on people.
Wow. So yeah, he's just out. I'm done. Peace out. Gone.
Yeah.
It's all over.
Yeah.
Which is probably okay because the guests at this point are kind of ticked, right? I mean, one gross.
Yeah.
They're not happy about that.
Well, he's doing all this stuff just to get under their skin.
Yeah.
You know?
It's all part of his joke.
He knows exactly what he's doing by calling. Yeah, he knows exactly what he's doing by calling them a gross, and I think that goes back with the insult / compliment / whatever it is. He's just he's trying to make a memorable exit. I think
you're right, and it will be.
He just wants people to remember.
I think the context of that gross comment does shed a little bit of light on whether that is an insult or not. Originally, that half view line.
Sure.
I mean, logically speaking, the words alone are not. But it's clear that the purpose that he has here is to befuddle and deride and condescend. And it's hilarious. Yeah. I've got no problem with it.
Yeah. No, it's great. I love the cheek of one gross, if I may use the expression, and you can just imagine everybody in the audience saying, no, you may not, actually.
Yeah, let me just be sure of that. That is awesome. Now, do you have any word nerdery on gross by any chance? You may not. I don't know.
I mean, a little bit. I mean, I think a lot of people have seen, packages of stuff that has a gross 12 dozen of something in it. So the word itself is, is not that unfamiliar to a lot of people.
Right.
It originally comes from basically the French for a big dozen, which I think was something like grosse douzaine or something. Okay. So it's kind of like a big dozen.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. But over time, the word that actually meant dozen kind of dropped off. And so this word gross just started to mean 144.
Okay.
I think what's interesting about this is the word gross on its own can mean a lot of things. It can mean big. It can mean fat or coarse or unrefined. It can mean rude or uncultivated or lacking in morals. Interestingly enough, I think certainly in America now, the primary meaning I think most people think of first is disgusting.
Disgusting, right?
Oh, that's gross. But that actually is a very recent term. I should say a very recent meaning that the Oxford English Dictionary actually still considers slang, and that didn't appear until the late 1950s.
Wow,
which was after this was published. So Tolkien definitely was not thinking of that. He was really thinking of these other older, still negative terms, still negative meanings, I should say,
right?
Of unrefined and rude and coarse and things like that.
My goodness, that's
which is precisely why it's not proper to use of people.
Exactly
obviously,
right. You don't use this of people. It is pretty funny. But then we get the poof. We get his disappearance. Now, we're not going to read that whole bit there, but the fact that there's the light and the flabbergasted guests, I did want to point out something that I can't believe I'd never thought of before. The line here, it says 144 flabbergasted hobbits sat back speechless. Really? Just a minute ago, we learned the invitations were limited to 12 dozen, and of those, well, at least one was not a hobbit. Gandalf.
Oh, yeah.
Probably more because he did talk about, and probably more because he did talk about people coming from outside the Shire. Presumably some of the dwarves, as we're going to see in the later part of this chapter, the 3 dwarves that accompany him out the door.
That's right, yeah.
So, I don't know if they were there.
That's a good point, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it should be at least only 143 hobbits and one wizard who was not speechless. But yeah,
because he knew what was going on. That's an interesting point. I mean, maybe it's just a figure of speech, but
and I think that is it.
That's
actually, I think that's all it is because in the second draft, I looked it up once I realized once I caught that, I looked that up in Hammond and Scull, and they pointed out that in the second draft of this, Tolkien wrote that invitations have been limited to 12 dozen or one gross, in addition to Gandalf and the host. So He dropped that, and he did
just simplifying it basically by
exactly
saying,
just leave it as 144. But on the galley proofs, he actually toyed with the idea, like you can see it apparently sketched in and then erased or whatever, or crossed out on his galley proofs. But according to Hammond and Scull, he toyed with the idea of changing 144 flabbergasted hobbits to 140 plus 3 dwarves and Gandalf. But that is kind of,
there you go.
Pointless. But yeah, it's interesting to see that he decided
Obviously,
to leave that. He was aware of it, right?
Obviously, he was aware of the discrepancy. He just kind of tried to keep things simple.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For readability's sake, I'm with him.
Yeah.
Just leave it.
Yeah, because if he suddenly dropped out 140 hobbits were flabbergasted, and then you're thinking, well, wait, what about
the 3 dwarves and Gandalf were fully aware of what was going on. It just takes you out of the moment.
It's unnecessary information. It kind of takes you out of the moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. So what do we have here? Odo Proudfoot, of course. He removes his feet from the table. He's stamping around. Everybody is quiet for a long time until they finally just all talking at once. But I thought
that's such a great moment too. You can see that you've seen that at parties before, where that moment everything suddenly goes silent and then everybody talks at once.
That one person gets on the table and wears a lampshade, and everybody just kind of like
everybody's like,
and then they start talking. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. He gets exactly the response that he wants.
Yes, exactly. This is precisely what he was looking for.
And annoyance.
Shock and annoyance. Yeah, you're right. And the fact that they all think this was in very bad taste.
Even the Tooks thought it was absurd.
Yeah, boy, that's saying something, huh?
Which,
I mean, these are the Tooks. These are the resident crazies of the Shire. And they think his behavior is absurd.
It's like that Bilbo guy. That was a weird thing he did.
Yeah, you think we're crazy. You should have known this Bilbo fella.
Yeah.
I do love, though, that at least one guy's not so sure, and it's Rory Brandybuck. Neither age nor an enormous dinner had clouded his wits. I wish I could say that. There are plenty of times where one and or the other cloud my wits, but
or both, have clouded your
both.
wits.
But he thinks that I'm not so sure. There's something going on. But you know what? Don't worry about it. There's still food here and wine.
He's the first person to call him Mad Baggins, which we know from the next chapter will tell us Mad Baggins sort of becomes his name in the legends.
Yeah, Mad Baggins. That's
great.
Right. That is awesome.
I love that. He called loudly to Frodo to send the wine round again.
That's
going to come back later, I think, in the next episode.
It does, actually, yeah. You're right. That ends up being the gift. Which we'll, spoiler, we'll read about in the next episode. Let me have you read that next paragraph there with Frodo.
Okay, the introduction to Frodo, the first time he really appears here.
That's true.
Frodo was the only one present who had said nothing. For some time he had sat silent beside Bilbo's empty chair and ignored all remarks and questions. He had enjoyed the joke, of course, even though he had been in the know. He had difficulty in keeping from laughter at the indignant surprise of the guests. But at the same time, he felt deeply troubled. He realized suddenly that he loved the old hobbit dearly. Most of the guests went on eating and drinking and discussing Bilbo Baggins's oddities, past and present. But the Sackville Bagginses had already departed in wrath.
Good for them. Get out of
here.
Frodo
did not want to have any more to do at the party. He gave orders for more wine to be served. Then he got up and drained his own glass silently to the health of Bilbo and slipped out of the pavilion.
I love that. There's just something...
It's such a great introduction to Frodo.
It really is. His character is very different from Bilbo. And we see some of that depth here. This that he just doesn't want to have anything more to do with this. He drains his glass silently. He's just quietly thinking of his beloved cousin / adopted father. And he's, raising a glass to his health and leaves. There is something very Frodo about that compared to what Bilbo would have done.
There is. Both Frodo and Bilbo are sort of fish out of water in the Shire to some degree. They don't really quite fit in.
Yeah.
But Bilbo kind of deals with it in sort of a joking fashion. He's kind of condescending to people. He's kind of, looking down on people, making fun of them, all the stuff that we've seen in the party. Frodo just kind of seems wiser.
Yeah.
More stoic than all the other hobbits.
That's a good way to put it.
He kind of has this gravitas.
Yeah. Bilbo does joke about everything. You're right. He's very...
Yeah.
He's a little theatrical.
And I think Frodo even says that about him in later on in this chapter.
I think you're right, actually, in his
conversation. He says he was always joking about serious things. Yeah.
No, that's what Bilbo does. I mean, he did that all throughout The Hobbit. And, Frodo's different.
Yeah, that's true.
Frodo's very different in that regard. So I think we'll see that. Well, Bilbo of course, has made his way back to his home. And I'm going to go ahead and pick up here kind of midway through a couple paragraphs down.
Yeah.
He took off his party clothes, folded up and wrapped in tissue paper his embroidered silk waistcoat, and put it away. Then he put on quickly some old untidy garments and fastened round his waist a worn leather belt. On it he hung a short sword in a battered black leather scabbard. From a locked drawer, smelling of mothballs, he took out an old cloak and hood. They had been locked up as if they were very precious, but they were so patched and weather-stained that their original color could hardly be guessed. It might have been dark green. They were rather too large for him. He then went into his study, and from a large strong box took out a bundle wrapped in old cloths, and a leather-bound manuscript, and also a large, bulky envelope. The book and bundle he stuffed into the top of a heavy bag that was standing there, already nearly full. Into the envelope he slipped his golden ring and its fine chain, and then sealed it, and addressed it to Frodo. At first he put it on the mantelpiece, but suddenly he removed it and stuck it in his pocket. At that moment the door opened, and Gandalf came quickly in. Oh,
man, there is so much we could say about that,
isn't it? And we will. And we will. Yeah.
This is such a great scene. I know we want to spend some time talking about
so many memories.
This suiting up.
Yes.
But just quick observation, it reminds me of the scene in like every Western where the gunslinger takes his guns down off the shelf. He hasn't used them in years, and he's finally going to go out there and fight the bad guy.
Yep.
And he pulls the guns down and cleans them, and puts on his belt and everything. That's what it reminds me of.
You see these close-ups.
Such a classic scene.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
Yeah,
you're right.
Yeah. So, and you're right, close-ups. Yeah, I mean, Tolkien uses words to get close-ups on the gear.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Whether it's the fact that the scabbard is battered black leather. I mean, it's not just a scabbard. It's these details that bring you close to the object.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, the cloak and hood. It's such a memory there, isn't there?
Those were mentioned in The Hobbit, weren't they?
Were.
Chapter 2.
Yeah.
And I've actually got that text in front of me. It says, "That's how they all came to start, jogging off from the inn one fine morning just before May on laden ponies. And Bilbo was wearing a dark green hood, a little weather-stained, and a dark green cloak borrowed from Dwalin."
And I think they even say after that, the text says that they were far too large on him, too.
That's right. Yeah. You're right. It does.
I've forgotten about that. But,
and you're right about those details. I'm noticing... What clothes does he take off? He takes off this embroidered silk waistcoat.
Yeah.
Remember, that had golden buttons.
Golden buttons. By the way, where did he get the silk? That's what I want. Where did the hobbits get the silk? I mean, that's one of those exotic sort of
materials,
ingredients, so to speak. Right. Yeah. I mean, we had to trade for silk. There's the Silk Road was a major piece of world history. Trying to find a place where you could get it. Anyway,
maybe the dwarves get it from Mirkwood.
There you go.
From finest Mirkwood spider silk.
That's right. It's a little thick.
No.
Work it to get it thin and supple.
Yeah, it's a little sticky and. But I love the way that he takes off this very fancy embroidered silk.
Yes.
Golden buttons, and puts on these untidy garments, this worn belt, this battered scabbard, mothball smelling.
Yeah. Some old untidy garments. That kind of sounds like me when I get home, I take off my fancy clothes and just throw on my old untidy garments. I lay around,
sure, of course.
Lay around the house clothes,
Of course, because they're comfortable, right?
If I'm going to go for a long walk, I want something comfy.
But what I love about this is that he's trading something Bagginsy for something Tookish, don't you think?
Very much so. Oh, absolutely.
This waistcoat is very, not. I wouldn't say comfortable. The waistcoat. I'm sure the travel clothes are much more comfortable than this.
Comfortable in terms of image projected. Comfortable in terms of status and
the creature comfort, status and wealth and things like that. He's trading all that for uncertainty and adventure and this battered stuff. And
it's beautiful.
It's another Baggins versus Took moment. I think it's pretty awesome. And I don't think I would have really picked up on it if we hadn't spent so much time with that theme in The Hobbit.
I know. That's the thing. I'm discovering as we're going through this, and I know, being 96 episodes in, I should have figured this out by now. But it sure is amazing how what we've done in the past has created such a foundation so that as we continue reading, we find more and more.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you and I have each read each of these works more than a dozen times, 20 times probably.
Mm-hmm.
every time we read it now, we're picking up new stuff, and it's because I think
Finding
of the time
new
we
stuff
studied.
every single time. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's amazing about that is knowing that our listeners will do the same, because we're giving them that experience without having to do the work. Congratulations, folks. Free enjoyment. Have fun.
We do all the extra reading so you don't have to.
There you go.
But you still probably should.
That's right. I love that line. That's awesome. The leather-bound manuscript. Just a couple episodes ago in our discussion on the note on the Shire records, the Red Book of Westmarch was described as, in origin, Bilbo's private diary, which he took with him to Rivendell. So that's this. And, of course, that's what Frodo, well, spoiler, is going to bring back to the Shire at the end of the story.
That's right.
But that's the Red Book of Westmarch right there. That's just awesome. Mm-hmm. What else do we know? The bundle. Now, so that's, we've kind of had to figure out by process of elimination, what's the bundle, right? We already know he's got the sword and the scabbard, though it's not Sting. He's not taking Sting. So what's in the bundle? I happen to think it's the mithril coat, because he gives that to Frodo.
This isn't Sting?
Well, where's the mithril coat? I'm almost thinking
Well, I definitely think this bundle is the mithril coat.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm thinking,
it just says it's a short sword and a battered scabbard. Yeah, it's probably Sting. I mean, it's not going to glow blue in the Shire, so it's going to look like an ordinary short sword. Yeah, it probably is.
I think that sword is Sting, and I definitely think this bundle is
the bundle's the mithril coat. Yeah. It's almost certainly the mithril coat, because how else is it going to get to Rivendell for him to give it to Frodo?
Right.
But then that, of course, that explains that must be Sting. So so we're talking about Sting, the mithril coat, and such a reminder of all the things we experienced in The Hobbit. Mm-hmm. But then there's the ring, isn't there?
Yeah.
Then there's the ring.
The ring on its fine chain.
And he does seal it, and he does address it to Frodo, and he puts it on the mantelpiece, but then not so much.
He suddenly removed it. I love that. Yeah. Suddenly he removed it. That implies to me that either he had a last-minute change of mind or he's not entirely in control.
And I think we'll see it's probably a little bit more the latter.
And I think it's the second one. I think so. I think the ring is at work here, and I think that's going to be one of our big themes we're going to see is the ring at work.
I think the ring knows it is at risk right now. It is of something that it never thought would be possible, that nobody would ever think is possible, which is to somebody voluntarily, willingly surrender it.
Giving it up. Yeah, that's true.
So, this is such a wonderful conversation, and I truly, truly wish we could read the entirety of this conversation, but we can't. Instead, I'm going to have you skip ahead, and there's a couple of paragraphs here that I want you to read, if you could.
Okay. I am old, Gandalf. I don't look it, but I am beginning to feel it in my heart of hearts. Well preserved, indeed, he snorted. Why, I feel all thin, sort of stretched, if you know what I mean. Like butter that has been scraped over too much bread. That can't be right. I need a change, or something. Gandalf looked curiously and closely at him. No, it does not seem right, he said thoughtfully. No, after all, I believe your plan is probably the best.
Yeah, this notion that Bilbo's finally starting to sense the damage that the ring is doing, that it has done to him over the last 60 years.
There's something so telling about that observation. That can't be right.
That can't be right.
It just it feels wrong to him.
Yeah, he's aware that this is a problem. That well preserved is hardly the word, and he knows.
Right. Yeah.
He knows
because he does not feel well preserved. He feels stretched in this wonderful simile that everyone who's read this book can't get out of their heads.
No, exactly.
Butter scraped over too much bread.
Boy, that's such a powerful visual, isn't it?
It's so Hobbitish because it's a food
butter
simile.
And bread, absolutely.
But it's so descriptive. You instantly know. You instantly have an experience of that.
Yeah, you really can sense it.
And you know how wrong it is to not have enough butter on your bread.
Oh, man, wrong. Does that ever happen to me? The answer is no, because I just get more butter.
Yeah.
But yeah. I should probably stop doing that.
And in fact, more butter, please. And, in fact, I guess it really wouldn't be an episode of the Prancing Pony podcast if we didn't mention letter 131, would it?
I had a feeling we were going there.
In a footnote to that letter, it's footnote number 21.
Boy, we're digging deep. Footnotes to the letters.
We are doing the footnotes to the letters. Tolkien says that The view is taken, as clearly reappears later in the case of the hobbits that have the ring for a while, that each kind, and by which he means sort of each race, has a natural span.
Right. Man, elf, hobbit, right.
Exactly, yeah. That each kind has a natural span, integral to its biological and spiritual nature. This cannot really be increased qualitatively or quantitatively, so that prolongation in time is like stretching a wire out ever tauter, or spreading butter ever thinner. It becomes an intolerable torment.
Oh, wow.
Now, we've already talked about, the natural span of hobbits. They are mortal. They are, part of they're in the Venn diagram of Iluvatar's children. They are with the second born, with men. But, their 100 is more like our 80 when it comes to years.
But that still makes him awfully old.
Yeah, for 111, yeah. I mean, you figure
that's
he's
probably
at least
close to our 100.
In his 90s in human.
Yeah,
in his 90s in human years, for sure. You really just see how wrong this is, and how, I don't know, just Tolkien's image of a wire that's being stretched out, I think, is another good metaphor for it. You really just kind of see how you can stretch it out, but you're not increasing the value, the quality of the life. You're not increasing the robustness of the life. It's just stretched out.
It's just longer, and that's all. Yeah,
it's just longer, and that's all longer and no better.
But even more tension,
like Gollum or the Ringwraiths.
Yeah, more tension, more strain.
Right? Yeah, that's.
I'm picturing this wire, being as tight as it can possibly be, and it's getting pulled even further. So now it's stretching and straining, and at some point it's going to fail. Right? You're going to get a place where it's going to finally just break, and it's an intolerable torment. And it makes you think, that phrase right there, it makes you have so much sympathy for Bilbo at this point. I mean, this is an intolerable torment. Yeah, that can't be right, as he says. That's kind of an understatement now.
Yeah. And then when you think of somebody like the Ringwraiths, or Gollum, who have been stretched out tauter and tauter, the butter spread thinner and thinner. Like you said, at some point something's going to break, and I think that's what a Ringwraith is. Probably.
Yeah, you're right.
We'll probably get more into this in a few chapters.
Yeah,
but yeah,
totally broken. You're right. I love what he wants. He wants mountains and rest, and to finish his book.
That Gandalf thinks nobody will ever read.
Yeah, I know. Hashtag supportive friends.
Your friends will tell you the truth, even when you don't want to hear it.
What's comedic about that, though, is what is the book? The book is the Red Book of Westmarch. What are we reading? The Red Book of Westmarch.
That's true.
Gandalf, what do you mean nobody's ever going to read his story? Everybody's going to read his story. It's going to be the most popular tale of the 5th age or whatever, 7th age or whatever age we're supposedly in.
That's true, yeah. The book of the century.
Yeah, it really is. So pretty amazing stuff.
It's going to sell out its first print run in 3 months. The Hobbit will.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a good point.
Gandalf.
Tolkien having a little fun.
I think so. And I love that he knows that Frodo would go with him, but he agrees that it would be best that he stay behind. He's too young. He still loves the Shire too much. Now's not the time. And I think he's right. And I think the right time is probably, I don't know, about 17 years from now. What do you think?
Probably so, yeah. I love this observation that Frodo's still in love with the Shire, though. I think that's something too. That probably isn't going to be I didn't even have this one on my list, but that's probably going to be something else we're going to watch. Yeah, a theme that's going to develop as the story progresses.
Because we will. We won't just see it in the Shire. We'll see it when all those times when he misses the Shire and when he realizes that what he's going through for the Shire. For the Shire, yeah. And then, of course, when he gets back and he's no longer in love with it because it isn't the Shire as he remembers it. Right. And he's not. He's not the same. And he's changed so much. Different. He's not the same person. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I agree. It's interesting. It makes me wonder. I mean, Bilbo clearly is not in love with the Shire anymore. No, he wants to leave. No. He doesn't get along with the people very well. I think he's tired anymore. Of the Shire, right? Exactly. He's tired of their pettiness. He's sick of it. Yeah, definitely. He's tired of it. Yeah, I agree. All those lesser Hobbit qualities we've talked about. He wants to get to Rivendell, where he can listen to the stories and finish his book and write poetry and not have people laugh at him about writing poetry. Yeah, I agree. Right. Have people appreciate him. And it makes me think about Tolkien's early development of the story when he was toying with the idea of should it be Bilbo at the center of the story or should it be Bilbo's son? I don't think he ever really seriously thought it would be Bilbo, but you realize it couldn't be Bilbo. No. I don't see Bilbo taking the ring
to Mordor
No.
to save the Shire the way Frodo does.
No, I don't think
he would have taken the ring to the Shire. We know that. He does offer to do so later.
To Rivendell, you mean? Oh, no, I see what you mean. Yeah. To take
at Rivendell, at the council, he offers to take the ring.
But
yeah,
he wouldn't have been able to.
But the motivation would have been different. I don't think it would have been as pure as Frodo's love for the Shire that motivates him.
Yeah, you're right. And for that reason and others, he would have failed even sooner in his quest, I think.
You're probably right, yeah.
I mean, the ring, he had the ring and used the ring, not as often as Gollum had, of course, but he'd used it often enough that the temptation to use it again would have been greater. And every time that Frodo succeeded in fighting that temptation, I think we would have seen Bilbo succumb, and it would have probably ended the quest a little sooner.
I think
sadly.
You're absolutely right,
yeah.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think that just underscores why why Frodo
had
is
to do
meant to have the ring.
Absolutely,
yeah.
You were meant to find the ring.
Mm-hmm.
And and I love that. We're going to get to that too because fate is a big part of this, and the hand of Iluvatar, and going to be some great stuff. I'm going to read the next little bit here. At this point, Gandalf says, hey, what about the ring? Yeah, it's over there in the envelope. Oh, wait, no, it's in my pocket. And he starts to change his tune, Why shouldn't it stay there? And I'm going to go ahead and pick up there. Gandalf looked again very hard at Bilbo, and there was a gleam in his eyes. I think, Bilbo, he said quietly, I should leave it behind. Don't you want to? Well, yes, and no, now it comes to it. I don't like parting with it at all, I may say, and I don't really see why I should. Why do you want me to? He asked, and a curious change came over his voice. It was sharp with suspicion and annoyance. You're always badgering me about my ring, but you've never bothered me about the other things I got on my journey. No, but I had to badger you, said Gandalf. I wanted the truth. It was important. Magic rings are, magical, and they are rare and curious. I was professionally interested in your ring, you may say, and I still am. I should like to know where it is if you go wandering again. Also, I think you have had it quite long enough. You won't need it any more, Bilbo, unless I am quite mistaken. Bilbo flushed, and there was an angry light in his eyes. His kindly face grew hard. Why not? He cried. And what business is it of yours anyway to know what I do with my own things? It is my own. I found it. It came to me. Yes, said Gandalf. But there's no need to get angry. If I am, it is your fault, said Bilbo. It is mine, I tell you. My own. My precious. Yes, my precious. Talk about some control. Talk about some power. The ring is exerting itself here in a big way.
And the possessive language that he uses. It's mine. It's my own.
Yeah.
Before going into the very obvious, my precious.
That's not a subtle reminder right there, is it?
No.
Even capitalized.
No. I tell you what is a subtle reminder of something very Gollum-like is, where was it?
Eyes?
I just saw it a moment ago. Oh, an angry light in his eyes.
I thought the same thing. Mm-hmm.
Remember that with Gollum?
Yeah.
The light in Gollum's eyes when he was angry in Chapter 5 of The Hobbit. So he starts out with subtle references to Gollum, and then he ramps it up very quickly, and you really see this possessive love that he has.
Yeah.
Man, it's
disheartening. It really makes you just kind of ache for the fall of Bilbo here. I mean, it's a temporary fall, and thank goodness it is. But you realize what risk he's been at this whole time.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. He had no idea that this thing with this power over him was here with him the whole time.
Yeah.
And he's been using it cavalierly. Been, he hasn't been using it for anything really nasty.
Just to avoid the Sackville Bagginses. That's a perfectly valid reason in my book, but yeah.
Right. Yeah, I mean, he's using it kind of innocently.
Yeah.
He's not using it to strangle orcs or anything like that.
Well, yeah, he's not doing it to like break into other people's homes and steal their stuff. Yeah.
Right. Which is the kind of stuff that Gollum started doing with it.
Exactly.
Pretty soon. So I think that kind of protects him, shields him from the worst of it somewhat. But yeah, you see this effect it has on him.
And I think, again, like we talked about, I think the ring is aware that it is in this very precarious situation.
Yeah.
So you notice that ramp up of Gollum, right? We go from gleam in his eyes to angry light in his eyes to the my precious. I actually, what this passage made me think of was Iluvatar during the themes, but Gandalf, not Bilbo, just to make that clear.
Oh, right.
First, we get that his face is grave and attentive. So right after where I ended, it says the wizard's face remained grave and attentive. Then we get that Gandalf stood up, he spoke sternly. And then finally we get Gandalf's eyes flashed, it will be my turn to get angry soon. Totally made me think of Iluvatar. First we get that he arose and smiled and lifted his left hand. Then we get he arose with a stern countenance and lifted his right hand. Then he arose a third time and his face was terrible to behold. It's this fascinating, triple pattern of increasing concern restrained by patience. I love it. It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Gandalf is very Iluvatar-like here.
Yeah, just in that sort of like, I'm not going to get angry yet. I'm not going to get angry yet. Okay, now I'm going to get angry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you used that phrase, the fall of Bilbo, a moment ago. And like you said, it's a temporary fall.
But
the comparison to Iluvatar and Melkor's fall I think is a good one.
Yeah.
There's a moment that we're not going to read, but this moment in just a few paragraphs when Bilbo's hand strays to the hilt of his sword.
Oh yeah.
And it's just that,
which is nuts.
Subtlest little
that is so
threat.
Nuts. I mean, come on, Bilbo.
You're going to draw your sword on Gandalf.
Give me a break.
I mean, that's like the subtlest little threat.
Yeah.
But that reminds me a little bit of Fëanor.
Oh yeah.
When he threatens Fingolfin in Finwë's council
Points
chamber.
the sword right at him.
Another fallen character.
Yeah.
And
it's the threat of violence.
So Bilbo is precariously close to this precipice where he could become another Melkor or another Fëanor because of this possessive love that he has.
And thankfully he doesn't. Thankfully this fall is a shorter fall and a temporary fall, as we'll see.
Yeah. You know what that makes me think of? There's in Return of the Shadow, History of Middle-earth, Volume 6, there are some notes, some of Tolkien's early notes where he's kind of like trying to figure out what the ring is going to do, where the ring's origin is. He figures out that the ring is related to the necromancer. And he actually has this little passage on one of his notes that says, the ring exacts its penalty. You must either lose it
or yourself. Yeah, that is such a great line.
It is.
And it's so telling about the nature of the ring, too. Yeah.
Yep. And you see Bilbo is like right on the edge right now.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think you see that more clearly than right here.
Yeah.
Certainly not this early on.
No.
That he is so close to losing himself right here.
Yeah. This is the moment.
The make or break. Yeah.
And if it weren't for Gandalf's intervention, I mean, I know you could say Gandalf's intervention precipitated this moment, of course, and it does. But, had he not done that, had he not confronted Bilbo and Bilbo walked away with the ring in his pocket, I mean, it's all over.
He might have been lost. He probably would have been lost. The moment would have been lost.
Yeah. The opportunity for him to surrender it, he never would have had another opportunity. And who knows what would have happened bringing that to Rivendell. Bad ideas. So Gandalf would get that wonderful confrontational moment. And finally, as Gandalf the Grey threatens to become uncloaked, which, I'm going to not say anything about how I think that might be a misdemeanor in most states.
That's an image I needed. Thank you. That's great.
But
you do not want to see Gandalf the Grey uncloaked.
No, I do not. I do not want to see Gandalf the Grey uncloaked.
I don't. Take the ring, please.
Here, have this. So let's just assume that has convinced Bilbo otherwise, and I'm going to have you pick up and read to the end of the section tonight.
Okay. Bilbo backed away to the wall, breathing hard, his hand clutching at his pocket. They stood for a while, facing one another, and the air of the room tingled. Gandalf's eyes remained bent on the hobbit. Slowly his hands relaxed, and he began to tremble. "I don't know what has come over you, Gandalf," he said. "You have never been like this before. What is it all about? It is mine, isn't it? I found it, and Gollum would have killed me if I hadn't kept it. I'm not a thief, whatever he said." "I have never called you one," Gandalf answered, "and I am not one either. I am not trying to rob you, but to help you. I wish you would trust me as you used." He turned away, and the shadow passed. He seemed to dwindle again to an old gray man, bent and troubled.
Bent and troubled indeed. I mean, I really, that speaks to the burden that Gandalf's carrying, and that he has carried now for centuries since he first arrived in Middle-earth. But yeah. What a moment.
We've talked, back in the Silmarillion, this is why Gandalf is here in Middle-earth.
That's right.
Is to address the issue of the ring. And he doesn't yet know that this is the one ring.
Yeah.
But he's starting to think it might be, and you can see he's all this responsibility. I'm not going to say that Gandalf was trying to escape his responsibility. Far from it. He was the only wizard that wasn't.
That's true.
But it's getting closer now. You know that the time is coming when he's going to actually finally really deal with this thing after being in Middle Earth for some 2,000 years.
Yeah.
So I mean, you can definitely see Bent in trouble. That makes perfect sense, knowing where he's been and where he's going.
And what he knows, and the fact that he knows
and
what's
what
coming.
He knows, yeah.
Absolutely. Great stuff. And this has been just a fantastic chapter. I can't wait to get to the rest of it in the next episode. But that wraps it up for the second part of A Long Expected Party. But be sure to come back next week, folks, when Bilbo goes on the road again.
Going places that he's never been.
Well, that's actually not true, is it? I mean, he is definitely seeing things that he may never see again. He can't wait to get on the road again.
That's right. No, but all references to Willie Nelson, the unofficial mayor for life of Austin, Texas, aside, we want to take a minute.
Really, he's the unofficial mayor of Austin, Texas.
He's a big thing here.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know who our unofficial mayor is, but it's probably nobody as famous as Willie Nelson.
He lives just a little bit outside of town. He has, parties and concerts and things that he does every year. But
does he still owe the IRS?
Probably.
For the rest of his life. Anyway.
Probably. But we want to take a minute to remind you about the Fellowship of the Podcast. That's our family of supporters over at Patreon. We're a few $100s away from our next goal of setting up a Discord server, which is going to give our patrons a chance to listen in live during a recording.
Oh, man.
It's going to be, I know, right?
Tonight's recording made me realize just what a bad idea that is.
Yeah. But we'll do it for you, folks. We'll do it for our patrons. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to laugh at our slip-ups and our bad jokes and more. Not to mention a sneak peek at an upcoming episode.
Boy, talk about being a fly on the wall. That's going to be a special treat for our patrons. So be sure to visit patreon.com/prancingponypod. When you join at the Gift of Gondor or higher, you're also going to get access to exclusive content like a full-length bonus episode every quarter, along with short postscripts to each chapter episode. Now, there is another way you can help us, too. You can check out the official library pages at our website, theprancingponypodcast.com, where we've gone ahead and put together a set of links for our listeners to all the Tolkien books we've ever mentioned on the show.
You can also give us a hand by posting a review on iTunes. This increases our visibility, which means more new listeners, more great questions for Barliman, more discussion on social media, and a more vibrant Tolkien community.
And finally, we'd really appreciate you sharing us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, wherever you hang out and might find Tolkien fans. Tell them about our show. Now, with that, it's time to see what old Barliman has in the mailbag for us tonight. Sean?
Okay, well, we got lots of responses to our Barliman's Bag question in episode 92 when we answered a question from Nathaniel G. about whether every Tolkien reader should read the history of Middle Earth.
Yeah, boy, we sure did.
We got tons of responses on that. Thank you, folks. It's been fantastic. Not surprisingly, people have some very strong opinions about this topic, with, I would say, most of the people we heard from saying, yes, everybody should read the history of Middle Earth, or at least a qualified yes.
Well, yeah, and to be fair, I think we gave a qualified yes, didn't we? I mean, we said there's a ton of great stuff there that adds depth and background, and obviously, if you've listened to the show, we love it. We're not going to tell you that you, out there in the red shirt with the earbuds, that you have to read it all.
That guy again.
I think we did that once, and somebody wrote in and goes, I was wearing a red shirt and had my earbuds in. When I was listening to the show, I totally freaked out. I thought you were looking at me.
And I looked, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Anyway, we're not going to tell you that you have to read it all, but I think we've shown that it really is a great resource for anybody who wants to find out more after reading the more complete works. And I would definitely say that it needs to be after reading them. But I think so.
Yeah. I think that's necessary.
Definitely. Yeah. But you're right. We got a lot of great feedback on this one. Listener Andrea, writing to us on Facebook, said she's working her way through the Book of Lost Tales. She said it's been a struggle, but what a payoff. So much extra info and amazing detail. And she added that the poem Cortirion Among the Trees was a particular favorite of hers.
That's a favorite of mine, too.
Yeah, you read it on a Tolkien reading day, as I recall.
I did, yeah. I think that was 2 years ago. Yep. One of my favorite comments came to us on Twitter from Lee S. Now, remember that one part of the question was whether History of Middle-earth has literary merit or whether it's just interesting as a historical record or as a historical document.
Oh, man, not that again.
I had to.
I know.
Lee said arguably...
Sorry.
Gilligan's Island. You don't think Gilligan's Island is real, do you? Those poor people. Lee said that arguably rejected drafts of Lord of the Rings are worth reading for literary reasons, even if not for their own literary merit.
Exactly.
She said it's the Morifach effect for fans who are so familiar with Tolkien's authorial choices that those choices come to seem inevitable rather than deliberate.
Yes.
So, folks, in case you don't remember what she's talking about there with the Morifach effect, that's a literary concept that Tolkien talked about in On Fairy Stories. It actually originated with Charles Dickens and G.K. Chesterton. It wasn't Tolkien's invention.
No.
But basically, the idea is, imagine you're sitting inside your favorite coffee shop, a place that you know intimately, and suddenly you look up, and through the window or through the glass door, you see the sign that's on the door of the window backwards, and you're reading it through the glass. And so instead of coffee room, it says Morifach, which is coffee room backwards.
Right.
Or I guess more likely these days, it would probably be scub rats.
Of course. Yep.
Let that one sink in.
But
yeah, it's basically
Scub rats. You got to do that.
Scub rats. Got to get the K and the C in there.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you're seeing something you've never seen before, something you're seeing from a new way.
A different
and fantasy
angle,
is like that. Right, exactly. Different angle is a perfect way to say it. Fantasy is like that. It offers us a way to see things from that new angle so that the familiar becomes new again.
That's a bit like Tolkien's own idea of recovery, and he actually talks about this in that section of On Fairy Stories.
Yeah, that's true. So I think what Lee is saying is that reading the history of Middle-earth does offer that kind of Morifach effect on Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, she's right.
Remember what we talked about with Verlin Flieger a few episodes ago, how much we wish we could go back and read Lord of the Rings for the first time again. And
wouldn't that be wonderful?
Obviously you can't.
No.
And we've read it so many times that it's just become familiar. We kind of take things for granted.
Right.
But reading the history of Middle-earth does allow us to approach it from a new angle, so it becomes fresh again. We see some of the struggles that Tolkien had with some of these choices. And I think that there is definitely some literary merit to that. And I think that's a fantastic observation. And I just wanted to talk about it here.
I agree. Absolutely. I remember reading that thinking, wow, that's brilliant. That is exactly what it does. Finally, listener Trotter wrote to us via email and pointed out that the question of whether readers should read the history of Middle-earth, he said, it's very well answered by Doug Anderson in his note to the text at the start of The Lord of the Rings. He's right. Now, we didn't talk anything about the note in our episode on all that prefatory material because we frankly already had 2 hours on the foreword and the prologue. Since that note is printed in our paperback edition before Tolkien's foreword, we thought we'd quote it. It has this to say: for those interested in observing the gradual evolving of The Lord of the Rings from its earliest drafts to its published form, I highly recommend Christopher Tolkien's account in volumes 6 through 9 of his series, The History of Middle-earth. These volumes contain an engrossing, over-the-shoulder look at the growth and unfolding of a masterpiece in progress, unparalleled in literature. Well said. Well said, Doug.
I absolutely agree. And there's that word engrossing again.
Yes.
So
well done.
There you go.
I don't think he did that on purpose.
I don't know.
I mean, in terms of does he think 144 people are reading? We might only have 144 people listening to this. That could be the engrossing.
Maybe so. Yeah. Yeah. No, really great feedback on that question. Please keep it coming as folks catch up to that episode. Keep it coming. It's a fascinating question, and I've really enjoyed talking about it with folks. So
it's been great.
Well, moving on, we got another interesting observation from one of our patrons, James R. in Virginia. He said, after the most recent episode, which at the time was episode 91, Laughing Shall We Die with Tom Shippey, he said, I came to a couple of realizations due to Professor Shippey's takes on 2 points. The first being the last line of The Lord of the Rings, where Sam says, well, I'm back. I have always seen the 4 Hobbit books as having several themes, but one of the most important is this. How far can you go and still come back? This is even hinted at in Bilbo's title for his book, There and Back Again. Now, I'll paraphrase a little bit from this point on.
Sure.
Basically, in The Hobbit, Bilbo's journey takes him geographically far away from his home, but he returns more or less unscathed.
Yeah.
In fact, James says he returns a better, smarter, stronger person than when he left, and I think we saw that in this episode.
Yeah.
Metaphorically, he didn't really go far at all, and so it was easy for him to return. Frodo goes farther geographically, but also mentally and metaphorically. He's wounded in body and mind, and he comes back with what amounts to PTSD.
Yeah.
He never really returns.
Yeah.
He never really settles back into the Shire.
No, he doesn't.
James says Sam falls somewhere in the middle. He goes just as far physically, if not mentally, as Frodo does.
Right.
But metaphorically, he's not taxed as badly as Frodo is.
No. No Morgul blade. No Morgul blade wound. No spider sting. Yeah.
Right. Or just carrying the ring for as long as he did.
The wheel of fire. Yeah.
Yeah. Frodo, who had gone too far and couldn't return, ends up sailing to the west. Sam, however, gets to come back, and he underscores it by announcing,
I'm back.
I'm back.
Yeah. Boy, that's a good point.
That's fascinating, and it echoes with some thoughts that I've had recently about how Sam is more like Bilbo in some ways than Frodo is. I want to leave that there for now because I think we'll explore it as we go through the story.
Yeah, I think we will.
Really, really fascinating observation, James. Thank you.
I agree. Well, you know what? He also, not surprisingly, had another observation that we want to share. He says that my second thought is about how the Fellowship travels back in time as the story goes on. I remember we had that special Patreon episode kind of on this exactly. So James says that the hobbits start off in the Shire in all of its late 19th, early 20th century glory, and then they begin their journey, first to Bree, which is only a little bit behind the Shire. After that, they travel through the wilds, and if you don't count the two roadhouses of Rivendell and Lothlorien and their elf proprietors, the next major place they come to is Rohan. The Mark has a very Middle Ages feel, buildings made with wood and thatch, scratching out a living in the dirt. Next, they pass through more wilderness and reach Gondor, where men built with stone and were wiser, though they have declined a bit. He says it feels almost like Rome or Constantinople.
Yeah, that's another great point.
Yeah.
And, obviously, and I know James knows this as well as we do, Tolkien doesn't mean for any of these places to be allegorical stand-ins for a particular empire or kingdom from history. But I definitely think the comparisons are there. I've noticed some of those comparisons that James is talking about.
Yeah.
Obviously, we talk about Rohan being based on Anglo-Saxon England all the time.
And we will.
Pretty much every time we mention it.
Yeah.
I've noticed the similarity between Gondor and Constantinople.
Not
as
Istanbul.
Well. Oh, now we have that song in my head. Istanbul was Constantinople. Now it's Istanbul.
So if you've got a date in Constantinople, she'll be waiting in Istanbul.
She'll be waiting in Istanbul.
Even old New York was once New Amsterdam. Why they changed it, I can't say. People just liked it better that way. And there's our digression for the day, folks.
We could sing They Might Be Giants
seriously,
all night long.
All night.
Yeah.
And we'd probably be just about as good as they were in terms of their vocals. I mean, they weren't really known for their singing skill, just their incredible songwriting.
I love their music. I love their stuff.
Brilliant stuff.
It's not for the singing voices.
You wouldn't say that they were like, great vocalists on the level of, like Freddie Mercury or,
Well, no, few are.
No, that's true.
Great lyricists, though.
Yes, hilarious lyricists.
Although I know they didn't actually even write that song. That was a
you're right. That's one of the ones they did. Yeah. But most of the ones they did.
Anyway,
we digress. There you go.
Something turned into a They Might Be Giants podcast.
That would be funny.
But no, I've noticed. I've studied a bit about Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire.
Yeah.
I've noticed that similarity, and I know I've compared the Numenoreans to the Romans. So I definitely see what he's saying about traveling back in time.
Yeah, I've kind of compared them to the Egyptians. Actually, I think
that's true, and Tolkien did too. Yeah,
big monuments. Yeah.
That's true, and Tolkien did that as well. Yeah. So, I definitely see what he's saying. I don't know what to make of it or what it means, if anything. I actually went and looked. It kind of seemed like the kind of thing Verlin Flieger might have talked about in the book A Question of Time, which talks a little bit about time travel, literally and figuratively, just kind of different ways Tolkien plays with time in the Legendarium. I couldn't find anything there on it. I also looked in Tom Shippey. Tom Shippey's done some great stuff on anachronisms.
That's true, yes.
And I didn't find anything from either of them, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's a great observation. And again, James, thanks for sharing it. We'll probably come back to this in a future episode someday if we figure out, kind of what to make of it, if we can find some significance to it.
That we might. And in fact, you mentioned Tom Shippey. I wonder if there's something in Roots and Branches. Do you have that collection? It's I
do not.
It's a book of a number of his essays. I have not read all of them, but I wonder if there's something there. So I'll take a look and maybe we'll throw that into a future episode. But for now, folks, that wraps it up for another episode of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Be sure to join us again next week when Bilbo's generosity is beautifully combined with his biting sarcasm.
Indeed. Thanks again for listening, and thank you for making our common room on Facebook such a fun place to spend time. We want all of you to be a part of this conversation, and it doesn't stop when the episode ends.
Nope.
So see the comments, questions, corrections, and more on Facebook at the Prancing Pony Podcast, on Twitter at Prancing Pony Pod, and on Instagram at Prancing Pony Pod.
And a very special thank you to our patrons at the Kierdan's contribution tier. DeMay in Alaska, James in Virginia, Tamsin in Minnesota, Emily in Texas, and Chad in Texas. Thank you all so very much.
Make sure you don't miss any episodes of the Prancing Pony Podcast. Subscribe to the show through iTunes, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app.
And one last thing as always, don't forget to send your thoughts, comments, and most of all, your birthday party speeches to us. To Barlowman at theprancingponypodcast.com. We'll try to get him into our next show, as long as they don't have too much poetry. Well, however long we've had, it is still far too short a time to spend among such excellent and admirable listeners. Until next time.
Farewell, friends.